Khleif.
Welcome to another edition of Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I am thrilled that you're here. And you are in for a real treat today. And you need to listen up. If you're in a relationship or want to be in a relationship, and you're a guy specifically, you definitely need to listen to this episode. You know, if you're a man that's providing for his lady, but you feel like you can't make her happy, you need to listen to this episode. Or if you're a woman who's in a relationship, you know, and you don't feel heard or seen or known, you need to listen to this and maybe point your man in direction of this. So I'm interviewing my coach, okay? This is the guy I hired to help me to show up in a more masculine way, a more safe way, you know, a more secure way for my next relationship. I don't know, maybe you've heard Tiffy and I have shifted our relationship to a friendship. She's my best friend, but we're no longer romantic. And so my guest today is Bart Morse. And Tiffy actually saw one of Bart's videos on social media and suggested that I speak to him. So I joined his program, and let me tell you, I had no idea how I was really showing up and operating in that relationship with her. You see, I consider myself incredibly masculine, okay? But what I discovered was I was doing a lot of things that were really more feminine, which made me freaking crazy, I can tell you that. You know, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And so, you know, and then having Bart tell me that Tiffy was probably emotionally babysitting me. Yeah, babysitting me. Yeah, oh man, that was not pleasant. But see, what I didn't realize is that I had personally had trauma driving my behavior. Now, if you don't know my story, I immigrated to this country when I was 6 years old. My brother Albert, my mother's Vancia, we ended up in Denver, Colorado, didn't speak English. I got thrown into school, and I discovered what bullies were for the first time, and got my butt kicked occasionally. And then my mom, proud Dutch woman that she is, thought it'd be a great idea to send me to school in wooden shoes and those leather shorts the Germans wear for Oktoberfest. So I got my ass kicked again. And, you know, then I have, you know, stuff that everybody has had happen to them. Playgrounds. I had a playground story where this girl embarrassed me in front of a bunch of kids that this girl I had a crush on. And I ended up not thinking I was good enough, which I didn't realize how much impacted my relationships. You know, it's funny, I spent a lot of time with Tony Robbins, and in that environment, you're taught to look forward, not drive through life looking in the rearview mirror, not exploring your past. But as part of this, I did explore my past, and I realized that I've had a lot of trauma, like you have, I'm sure. And you know, and not thinking I was good enough was impactful. And so, you know, sometimes I was controlling. You know, I was reactionary, complaining, you know, or defensive, angry sometimes. And sometimes I'd give ultimatums, you know, or I'd use leverage. Now, see, that shit can work in a business, but that does not work at home, okay? It doesn't work in an intimate relationship. And, you know, and I use those things in business all the time. I run two very large companies, you know, the controlling piece and, you know, and sometimes anger and sometimes using leverage or ultimatums to get what I want in business relationships does not work at home. You know, and you see what it is that's unpredictable behavior to a woman. You know, a woman, and if you're a woman listening to this, you know this is true. You want to feel love, you know, so that you can be feminine and creative and, you know, free-spirited and playful, flirtatious. That's what I want in a woman, you know, but to get that, Rod has to be calm and cool and collected and, you know, and listen without reacting and really be purpose-driven and confident. See, when a man is like that, that allows a woman to be feminine. And so, you know, me personally, I'm basically creating the new Rod. It's, you know, to be more masculine and centered. You know, I can't stand the thought of showing up in a feminine way. Again, that makes me freaking nuts. And see, feminine is emotion-driven decision-making, okay? And that's, you know, I was allowing my emotions to decide, you know, drive some of my behavior and my decisions. Masculine is being principle-driven in your decision-making. And this is some of the stuff I've learned with Bart. I'm about to introduce him here, but I wanted to give this big pre-frame. You know, so I'm working to show up now in new relationships in a predictable and safe and kind way, you know, and instead of being, you know, what Bart calls a victim. Well, God, again, it makes me freaking nuts. So if you're a guy and you want to be masculine, more masculine, show up that way, you really need to watch or listen to this episode. Bart, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we're gonna We're going to have a fun interview today. And I think, honestly, this is not a real estate interview, but frankly, this is more important. So let me ask you a question, Bart. What does it mean to be masculine these days? And is that what women really want?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you so much, Rod, for having me on the show. I know you have an incredibly passionate audience, so it's just an honor to be here. And more importantly, it's been a complete privilege to watch your transformation, to hear you talk about yourself, the relationship, and the way that you just did brings me such joy as a coach. So thank you for being an excellent client to work with.
Thank you.
So we all know kind of the traditional definition of masculinity. It's, muscles, it's macho, it's tough. When men come to work with me, I like to give them a different definition of masculinity, which is determining how you're going to show up ahead of time. So it's principle-driven decision-making, as you've said. When you're on the battlefield of life, there's going to be challenges, circumstances, unexpected adversity. If you determine ahead of time how you're going to respond to that, that's masculinity. And it's work that you have to do in order to show up in that way. If you don't, then you're going to default to operating from your emotions, which are so often fears and insecurities. And so to kind of bridge that over into the next question, what are women wanting? You'll hear women
Well, I'm going to
say,
tell you something. Let me interrupt you for a second, because I'm dating now, okay? And I can't tell you how often I've heard a woman tell me, all these men are feminine. They're emotion driven. It's like really frustrating from what I'm hearing to be a single woman out there right now. There's the entitled component, there's the feminine component.
Yes.
So anyway, please continue.
So I think a lot of guys are thinking women are looking for that chiseled jaw, that leading man look.
Right.
And certainly there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But what they're really saying is, I want to be with a man who is safe and secure. When you are emotion driven, when you're operating from your fears, your insecurities, you come across as unpredictable and ultimately unsafe. Right. And a woman doesn't want to be with a man who makes her feel unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm, I've heard, again, back in this dating nightmare that I'm in, that, a woman wants to be able to exhale when they're with a guy, have a rock in the storm, as it were.
Yeah.
And so why don't you tell us your story and how you got into this? That's typically how we start an interview, but give us a little backstory on you and let's go from there.
I want to tell you a story from my marriage. So I was a runner, am a runner. I completed a road marathon, which is 26.2 miles. And about 2 kids into my marriage, I decided that I wanted to do what's called an ultramarathon. Ultramarathon is anything beyond 26.2 miles, and it typically occurs on like a trail. And so, I was a busy dad, 2 kids, and I didn't feel like I had time to do your classic kind of marathon prep. So I found this hack, if you will. Tim Ferriss, author of the 4-Hour Workweek, published a follow-up book called The 4-Hour Body. Mm-hmm. And in that book was an ultramarathon training plan for a 50K. So 50K translates into about 30 miles. Mm-hmm. And this could be on a trail. I found one up in Central California. So I live in Southern California. This could be a couple hours north. And so I signed up with a buddy who is an Ironman. Mm-hmm. And so we set out to do this race, and about, and real quick. So Tim's plan, his training plan was a lot of HIIT training, high intensity interval training, and hill sprints, instead of running long mileage over throughout the week. So we set out on this thing. Halfway through the race, I break down. I cramp up everywhere, hit the dirt in total agony.
Right.
And I quickly realize I am not prepared adequately for this race.
Right.
I'm able to pick myself up and hobble to base camp. Now, this race had a base camp, 3 loops of about 10 miles. Mm-hmm. So I'm halfway through. I get to base camp, and my wife, she had driven up from Southern California to meet me kind of at the finish line. So she's there. I get into base camp and I see her, come up to her. And of course, she thinks I'm finishing and I have to give her the bad news. I have 10 more miles. And so she says, okay, my friend Scott, the Iron Man, he had finished the race meanwhile and was like shoes off. And he was like relaxing, feeling really good. Turns to him, says, Scott, can I borrow your shoes? Scott says, sure. So she laces them up. They're about 3 sizes too big, of course. She says to me, let's go. And so together, we spend the next 10 miles, me hobbling the next 10 miles through the ranch lands of Central California, tall grass, oak trees together. We finish the race. And that to me is a picture of what marriage looks like.
Yeah, that's quite a story. Wow, that's a woman.
Now, a couple things. One, I learned that Tim Ferriss never completed a 50K ultramarathon himself.
Fucker.
Secondly, unfortunately, I learned 15 years and 3 kids later that I was not prepared for my marriage. And, they say it takes 2 to tango, but every tango has a leader, and I was not prepared to lead. And so it ended in divorce, unfortunately. So I am, here today on a mission to give men the information that I didn't get in time. But if men get this information, it might not be too late for their marriage.
No, I know you've told me about some guys that have been separated and are on the verge of separation that you've shifted. So what did you do prior to relationship coaching? And did it play a role in what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a management and technology consultant for Fortune 500 companies. So my clients were Microsoft, the Federal Reserve Bank, State of California, T-Mobile, Pacific Life Insurance.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, what I would essentially do as a consultant was come in, identify pain points, opportunities, help them set, goals, and then apply frameworks and best practices to net results as quickly as possible. So there's been a lot of crossover in the sense that in working with men, it's really the same process.
Yeah, you've given me some frameworks, and it really, what we mean by that is how to react in a calm, cool, and collected way in certain situations, and not be emotional when something triggers you or your spouse is unhappy with you. And by the way, this is he doesn't do like counseling or relationship coaching. This is just for men to show up the way they need to show up, right? But those frameworks are really important. And I think what's really helped me so far is, I move very quickly. I'm irritated because I don't have a 5-star review on iTunes because I interrupt too much because I'm trying, I'm moving too fast. I'm too reactionary. So I'm at 4.5 stars, which kills me. But that ties right into all this because, when I was with Tiffany, I would react without thinking. And that's something that's been really helpful for me to slow it down. What other sorts of behaviors are you seeing in men that they're doing that is creating that, well, really they're operating what you call below the line, fear-based operating. Yeah. And so what sorts of behavior do you see out there that men need to work on?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked that, because one of the biggest behaviors that men are unaware of that is so damaging is defensiveness. Defensiveness is really a natural motion for a man. And I would argue that in business, it's very common to kind of bring your logic into the discussion. Hey, that's not going to work for these reasons. And, it's almost permissible to sort of, shut the other person down depending on sort of the hierarchy or whatever. It's okay. It's acceptable in a lot of ways. But a better way in relationship is to make the other person feel heard and acknowledge their feelings. right? So that's what we work on. A lot of times men just have not ever learned how to acknowledge their wife's or girlfriend's feelings when it's something that they don't necessarily agree on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you taught me that as well, and a framework for dealing with that, so that that it's acceptable is the wrong word, so that a woman feels heard.
That's right. Defensiveness can you could even say it comes across as weakness oftentimes in the eyes of a woman.
Right.
Because they're like, man, you're not able to just hear what I'm saying.
Right.
Because you're too insecure. That's how it kind of comes across. I want to shut you down and defend and sort of turn it back on you so that we don't have to go to that place where I might have to admit that I've got a little bit of a hole in my game, or I've got a little bit of a fear, insecurity about this thing. So I would say defensiveness is a big one.
And you get that in apologies as well, because you've taught me some great ways to apologize the right way, where I'm not, I own the apology. I'm not trying to justify the freaking, I'm really sorry that this happened because of this, and this. It's instead of just saying, I'm sorry, I fucked up.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
this is the reason I did it.
Yeah.
Now you're just negating the apology.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful, because that's I'm a talker, man. I can articulate. I've got a library downstairs of thousands of books, and I've got a great vocabulary. And so when I apologize, there's always an extension on that apology, which negates the apology, frankly, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Complaining, venting.
Yeah.
Those are other behaviors that, you mentioned emotional babysitting. When you complain and vent.
Yeah.
So often, the woman starts to feel like the mom in the relationship.
Right.
She's got to make you feel better.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really easy to get in that habit of just being a complainer, because you know that she's going to be right there to support you.
Yeah. And see, that's, I did that a lot, because I felt like she was my outlet to vent about the crap I was dealing with with clients, sometimes with business partners, with adversaries in business. I would vent thinking, okay, well, she's my resource for that, but it's not the place for that, because not only does that instill fear in her, but again, she's emotionally babysitting.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
Right. Which I fucking can't stand, thinking that that's how it was, man. That makes me nuts. But
another one is indecisiveness.
That's very common, I think, with men. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And behind that, you talk about below the line, right? So we've talked a lot about operating above
the line from love and kindness.
Love. Yes. And the opposite of love is fear. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so behind indecisiveness is really fear.
Right.
What if I make the wrong decision?
Right.
So I'm going to just not make a decision.
Right.
And then I can't be wrong.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's funny. In dating, I'm seeing that as well, because a really feminine woman, wants me to pick where we're going to have dinner. I mean, something as simple as that.
Yes.
They don't want to decide where we're having dinner. So
That's
like,
right.
I'll go to Miami, and I'll go on a date and I'll say something like, hey, I don't really know the town. You want to suggest something for dinner? And sometimes I can feel some pullback because I'm not making that freaking choice.
That's right.
And so, that's a real simplistic example, but is that ties into, right?
I think that's that masculine, feminine energy dynamic, right? If you're going to be indecisive, that's going to come across as sort of this feminine energy.
Right.
And you'll see, even with a dinner decision, she'll start to become more masculine.
Right.
Well, let's just go here.
Right.
Start making the decisions.
And see, guys, in any relationship, and I learned this in the Tony Robbins environment, he talks about this a lot. He has a whole day on relationship and talks about masculine and feminine energy, and how in any relationship, there has to be that polarity for there to be a sexual spark, for there to be energy. Even in a gay relationship, it's got to be masculine and feminine energy. And if there's not, you basically have a friendship, but there's no, it's not sexy. It's not, there's no sexual energy at that point if it becomes a friendship. So, and I know Tony talks about this a lot, where women that have either had an abusive past or are really focused on business can put on this masculine mask. Right. And then what happens when they're masculine like that, they will attract a man they can manipulate, a pleaser. And what's sad about that is they'll never feel truly safe with that man because they can manipulate him.
Yeah.
So so it's a very common dynamic today, you know,
Yeah.
in this whole feminism movement where, you know, I can do it as good as men and whatnot. We don't go down that rabbit hole. But the point is, you know, women that operate like that are going to attract a man that's effeminate because that's how they'll create the polarity because they're the masculine in that relationship.
Yeah.
But so what are some of the, you know, I think you've started to talk about this, but I want to make sure we hit them all. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see men make, like defensiveness and reacting? What are some other things?
Well, first off, I want to say,
Controlling.
controlling the ultimatums.
Right.
I want to say just waiting too long to take action and make changes.
Yeah.
Kind of like the guy who doesn't want to pull over and get directions, which
Right.
sort of all of us, right?
Right.
If you wait too long, then you really dig yourself into a deeper and deeper hole, because what happens is the trust erodes over time. I think a lot of guys think, well, you know, I'm showing up, I'm providing a paycheck, nobody's died, so I'm doing a pretty good job of protecting. But what they don't realize is, you know, things like not doing what you say you're going to do, not being, you know, totally honest about things, not hearing her.
Right.
You know, those just erodes the trust over time. Over time, she feels unheard, unseen, unknown, unloved. So not understanding how to create emotional connection. And a lot of guys want more physical connection in their relationship. And women love physical as well.
Right.
But so often,
But it starts emotionally.
it starts with the emotional
It has to
connection.
start between the ears. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you've never learned how to create that emotional connection, because maybe you just were focused on kind of winning the girl, getting
sex,
getting
and that's it. You know,
buying the gifts or what. Everybody's got a different story, right? I hate to make too many generalizations,
right?
But if you've never really learned how to create that emotional connection, when the going gets tough, right? That's the problem. Is like when you're dating, sometimes it can feel a little bit, you know, like the wind is to your back. You both want to just get married.
Right.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
But then you get married and it's like after that, man, it gets tough. Right.
That's when the
real
work
challenges
starts.
Right. That's when the work starts. So as a man, you got to create emotional connection in the midst of challenges and adversity. So I would say that's a big, you know, challenge for men for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, I know what it cost me in my previous relationship, even my first marriage. You know, that was very acrimonious, and she would say I'm a controlling piece of you know what. But, you know, even with my daughter, you know, I was so focused on business and success that I brought that energy to my relationships. And even with my daughter, sometimes I'm really intense, you know, when I'm coaching her, and judgmental sometimes and opinionated, and I'd make her angry because she's exactly like me. And, you know, we've had, you know, some conflict like that. And I realize now what was driving all that. And of course it cost me the romantic relationship with Tiffy. But, you know, I can tell you even in business, sometimes my intensity would make people cry sometimes. And I'd have to apologize. Listen, it's not you. I'm just focused. And so, but that really was me operating from fear. And it's hard to, it's painful for me to admit that.
Right.
I have to be honest.
Right.
It's painful for me to admit that, you know, or irritating business partners, talking over people, cutting them off, so on and so forth, you know, and that's fear-based. Oh, I hate saying this, feminine behavior. So, you know, and this is what I'm learning, guys. And that's why I wanted you guys to hear this, because I know there's a lot of you like this out there. And please know I'm not getting anything from bringing him here or anything like that. I'm going to suggest you reach out to him for sure. In fact, on that note, I set up a link for him. He doesn't do much marketing. I set up a link for him. If you text Bart to 72345, he's got an awesome video that talks more about this that you can watch. Okay, so text Bart to 72345. But, you know, I'm going to tell you, I've learned a ton. But tell me about some success stories, Bart. Tell me maybe highlight one or two of those that where you've helped somebody.
Yeah. So I want to say one thing about that. So I do work with wealthy guys who have status, not everyone,
right?
But, you know, for guys who feel like, man, if I could just make more money. So nothing wrong with making more money.
Right.
You know, we all want that for everyone. But for guys who feel like, man, my marriage will be good once I make a certain dollar amount.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Right.
It's not true. I hope you make more money, but you're going to find that the challenges are just different. once you have more money. You still have to work on the marriage.
Right.
Right. One of my clients, this guy who came in over social media, and he's one of the most successful guys in Silicon Valley. He's sort of a Forbes list investor. And he is, you wouldn't expect this, one of the nicest guys you've ever met. And therein sort of lies the problem when it came to his marriage. So his wife was very masculine. She was a tech executive, and he was avoiding conflict, like so much.
Wow.
And so we identified that he was trying to get sort of the love and appreciation that he desired by not rocking the boat, not saying
Being a pleaser. Yeah.
Exactly. And he identified that. We work a lot on self-awareness. He didn't want to say no, and he didn't want to ask for what he needed. When he came when he started working with me, he's on the brink of separation. So we identified, these different kind of pain points of avoiding, of pleasing. And so we went to work on his principles and started to develop this new muscle of asking for what you want and being okay with rejection, and also saying no, because she was kind of walking all over him. And, you sort of alluded to this. When you start to say no, that's not such a bad thing.
Right.
Right? That's actually a good thing. It's counterintuitive, but that's what your wife wants, is to be in a relationship with a man who's capable of saying no.
Yeah.
Right? Because it doesn't align with...
Because it feels secure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's you can't manipulate. If you can't manipulate, you feel secure. It's a solid dude.
And as you know, what we're talking about when you say no is not a no out of your fears, but a no out of your principles.
Yeah. What you believe in.
Yeah. Right. That doesn't align with who I am.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow door slamming in my house because I want us to have a safe house for us in our relationship and the kids.
Yeah. That's an example. If the spouse slams the doors, it's like, no, don't do that.
Right. So you're advocating for what you want, right? And that's the reasoning behind saying no, right? So after about 4 months, we created a lot of new behaviors, also rooted in new beliefs. And what was really cool was the physical intimacy had died down. So after, 4 or 5 months of working together, that dynamic started to change. And that was huge for him because he wanted more physical connection.
Sure.
And she finally felt safe to participate in that as well. And so, in his words, he felt like the marriage went from a 2 to an 8.
Nice. Nice.
And he's no longer identifying himself as sort of this nice guy, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate to say it, but sometimes us guys, we act like little bitches, and that's
100%.
I hate it. I freaking hate admitting that, but that's what I've learned, which has just been such a freaking eye opener for me. Another thing is I recognize that because of stuff that happened to me when I was a kid, I can't stand rejection. So I will proactively reject someone if I feel like there's a possibility of being rejected.
Very common.
Which is that common? Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was, I just discovered that. And so, and getting clear on your purpose and, identifying, who I am and you've helped me do that. And, I help people achieve freedom through real estate investing. That's really my purpose statement. That's the truth of it. And that's my driver. See, a masculine man knows who he is, what he stands for, and where he's going, right? And, if you don't know those things, you're led by your emotions, which is how I was led.
Yeah.
So you've got to have a vision for who you are as well. And I really appreciate you helping me with that. So what do you think is one of the bigger challenges that you encounter when you're working with men that are, doing this work? What comes up?
Yeah. Okay. A couple of things on that. So one is a lot of guys, 9 out of 10 times when I ask a guy what his purpose is, he'll say to provide for my wife and kids. Okay. So that's awesome. That's your responsibility. That's every man's responsibility who has a wife and kids, to provide for them. But that's not your purpose. Your purpose should be outside of the marriage.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, then you're going to fall into this trap of trying to please through providing. You're going to be on this hamster wheel. It's going to be the happy wife, happy life thing that then slips into codependency.
It's exactly what happened to me, man.
Right?
It's exactly what happened to me because I remember, I felt like I was living my life to make Tiffany happy. And if you asked her, what's Rod's purpose in life? She would tell you to make me happy. But that actually became some codependency for me.
That's right.
And
very common.
Yeah, it's very common. Wow.
And Jordan Peterson talks about this. So he says men need to have responsibility to feel meaning. Yeah. So it's okay to be proud to be providing for your family. That's a good thing, and make lots of money, and great. That's awesome.
Right.
But what I'm talking about is an opportunity to discover your great, like a purpose beyond your marriage, and that benefits the marriage.
Sure.
Because the woman that you're married to think about it, she was attracted to the man that you used to be prior to that marriage. And
I want you to hear what he just said. The woman that was attracted to you for the man you used to be. And that really hit home with me, I got to tell you, because we shift. We
get lost in the marriage.
Right.
We maybe stop going out and being with friends. I think a lot of guys I talk to, they don't have a lot of male friends anymore.
Same here. Same here. I was totally focused on her.
Right.
And women, I hope this is resonating with you as well. And if it is, you might want to direct your guys to this type of work because I like I said, it's been a real game changer for me. But I felt like I was getting lost in it for sure, and codependent. But I'm working on me, and it's been a real eye opener. I have to tell you, Bart, it's been a real freaking eye opener, And the big thing is for me, like we talked about, is deciding how I'm going to show up before I even have a conversation with her, so that I don't react, and I'm not opinionated and judgmental, and I'm that safe, calm, cool, collected guy that she needs, or whoever I get with needs. So what if you're not in a marriage or a relationship yet? I mean, should you wait to start working on yourself?
Absolutely not. I mean, now is the time to do the work.
Right.
What's so great about doing this work now, if you're in the dating phase, is that you can set the tone. You can practice, saying no. You can practice asking for what you want when the stakes are a little bit lower. And that develops a healthy relationship before you ever get married. Now she knows that this is a guy who
solid.
Who's on a mission, who has his vision figured out. He's got a set of principles that he lives by, and he's going to say no to me at times. Yeah.
And guys, that may sound a little crazy to you, but that's what a woman wants. They want that solidity in a man. And women, I'd love to hear from you if you feel otherwise, okay? But I believe this to be the case, and I've heard it enough times now. So start now is the point. And
and being a huge thing that guys also benefit from is starting to be more proactive.
Yeah.
Okay. So this happens time and time again in a marriage. You get, you kind of win the girl, you get in the marriage, and then a common kind of complaint among women is that he's stopped taking me out for date nights.
Right.
He's not planning anything. I'm sort of running the household.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we do is take a look at that. Are you taking her out for date nights? Are you planning the weekend getaways?
Yeah.
Are you posting little, notes and letting her know how much she means to you?
Right.
Being proactive is huge.
Sure.
And I think probably some of the men feel like, or listening to this might feel like we're sort of beating up on men. But all of this work, I think you would agree, actually makes you feel better.
Sure it does.
Right?
No, you're owning yourself. You're owning who the frick you are, and how you show up, and it gives you a strength and a power, and you recognize, I mean, if you're honest with yourself, you recognize that this is important stuff, that and my God, and you said happy wife, happy life. I believe in that, but to have that, you've got to do some work.
Yes.
And so And those of you, I know if you're watching me, you want success, okay? And whatever that means to you. And I'm going to tell you, the most successful men on the planet are in a solid relationship. That's a proven. Google it. The most successful men out there are in a solid relationship if you do it on a percentage basis, and it makes a big difference. I know for me, my business is suffering because I'm out there, catting around looking for what's next, and my growth happened when I was with Tiffany, and so that's and previous marriage as well. That because I wasn't, I wasn't scattered, and I didn't have that solid home relationship, and so that was a big piece, a big discovery piece for me as well.
Well, let me say something really quick about that. So marriage, I believe, is so awesome because it's going to bubble up the insecurities, right? And it's going to give you visibility into a lot of the gaps or the fears that you've been carrying, maybe for a long time. It sort of forces those up to the top. And that's the hard part about marriage. But if you have a healthy game plan for how to deal with it, then there's a refinement process that happens, and you grow tremendously as a person through this relationship, this marriage with the other person. So that's the beautiful thing about marriage, for sure. But it requires, the first step is extreme ownership.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what we're talking about. And Jocko and Leif Babbitt,
the big SEAL guy, if you don't know who that is. Right?
Yep. Has written that book, Extreme Ownership, which is essentially saying, I'm going to communicate, I'm going to take responsibility for, even if something goes wrong, I'm going to take responsibility for it, even if I didn't, necessarily feel like it was my fault, by saying, you know what, I must not have communicated clearly what our objective was here on the battlefield. And when you start to take that mindset on, you're going to find that the people around you will naturally then start to take responsibility for their actions too. But it requires that getting over your ego and starting to take extreme ownership first. And that's what being a leader is.
Yeah.
Pushing past
that.
Own
it 100%. Own it 100%. The good, the bad, the ugly. So the bottom line is, feminine women want a man that's masculine, that knows who he is, lives by principles, is solid, is not driven by emotion. He's driven by his principles. And so, guys, even if you're not in a relationship, if you want to be in a relationship, start looking into this work, because I can tell you, being out there dating, I'm hearing a lot of complaints from women about, the feminine nature of a lot of the men out there, So let me ask you this: in your experience, what are the key components of a healthy, fulfilling relationship for a man?
So much of it is about avoiding the codependency trap.
Okay.
So really, what we try and do is make sure that the man knows his true self, right? And true self is, what's my identity? What do I really stand for? And that's a lot of the work that we do, as you know.
Yeah.
I'm a man who X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And knowing that then gives you a guideline or a roadmap, North Star, for how to show up. And so what I would say is this: healthy relationship means you have a life outside of the marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Which I didn't have, honestly, with my ex.
It's a counterintuitive thing.
Totally focused on her, thinking that that's what was right, but it really wasn't.
Right.
And then towards the end of the relationship, before we shifted, she's like, "You need to have more guy friends and get out there." And
that's right.
I just didn't want to.
Right.
But the reality of it is that it would have made a difference if I had.
Right.
And so I'm nurturing those relationships now.
That's one of the, so when guys come to take the first step in working with me, right, I have them take a little quiz.
Okay.
And it's got 8 areas. I call them 8 mountains. And it's like body, mind, soul, companionship, brotherhood, fatherhood. Because I want guys to see that there's so many other areas outside of just the relationship and the marriage.
Yeah.
And you've kind of got to treat it like an investment portfolio. You've got to be making investments across these different domains or areas of a man's life in order to have a balanced and more fulfilling life.
Yeah, see, that was a huge eye-opener for me, because I thought, hey, if I'm working my ass off, providing an unbelievable life for my ex, and then, totally focused on her, that's what every woman wanted. Wrong. That's not. You know, they want to see that balance. They want to see that diversity, and that was a real eye opener for me as well. And so, you know, how can a man strike that balance between, you know, being part of a committed relationship like I definitely was in, super committed in my view, but also maintaining some individuality?
I think it starts with getting into some sort of a brotherhood community with other men, because when you do that, it just naturally is going to lead to adventure, hobbies, and there's just certain things that you get from being in a relationship with other men that you're not going to get from a woman, and that's okay. I think we've lost this tribe culture, tribal culture, of course, because we're such rugged individualists here in the United States. Social media has, as you know, just loneliness is off the charts, which is very counterintuitive, because it feels like we should be more connected. But because it's virtual connection, we've lost a lot of the real connection that you only get from being, in person. And so I think that men getting in relationship with other men with other healthy men who are trying to level up, that's one of the things that I offer through my program is you can get into a community.
And it's called Lion's Den.
The Lion's Den.
And the lions are the emotional behaviors that we're trying to tame.
Really, the beliefs, the fears, I feel rejected. I feel like a loser. So many successful guys. I mean, I run these executive meetings with super
and you don't just work
guys.
with successful guys.
No, I do not. No, I work with all sorts of guys. But it's really interesting. Some of the most successful guys that I work with will kind of go around the room and say, of these different lions, what resonates the most with you? And so often, 70, 80% of the time, they're like, loser.
I feel like a loser. And they're super successful. It's crazy. I get it. And honestly, I mean, on the flip side, women need the tribal community as well. I know Tiffy would go on 100%. Trips with girls. I didn't love that, honestly, but she just needed to be around women, and just like guys need to be around guys. It's the same thing.
Same thing. Right. So a healthy relationship requires that you have relatimes outside of it.
And then you come together, and it's more powerful when you're like that. So what advice would you have for guys? It's hard to be, honestly, preparing for this interview was hard. I've done more prep for this than probably any other interview, because I'm like, you know what, I'm going to I'm going to be vulnerable here, which, as a masculine guy is tough for me to be vulnerable. So what advice would you have for guys, who struggle with being vulnerable and expressing how they feel emotionally in a relationship?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. Important to know that vulnerability is inextricably linked to intimacy. And you need intimacy to have a really fulfilling relationship. At least that's the theory. Brene Brown gave a TED Talk years ago on the power of vulnerability. It has 20 million views. If you've never watched it, watch it. And there's strength in vulnerability. That's the counterintuitive or paradoxical thing. By sharing that I feel afraid or I've got this weakness, you actually look stronger in the eyes of the other person.
Interesting. I actually say that in my boot camps, and I primarily towards women, that are operating in a masculine way, but I never looked in the mirror and thought about it as a man, which is interesting for me. That was a real eye opener for me. And I was telling Tiffy about this interview and telling her I'm not too excited about how vulnerable I'm going to be. And she's like, Rod, you're going to show up stronger because you're being vulnerable.
Yes.
And that's kind of an eye opener for me as well.
Let me say one thing about that. So, you've learned through this process that being vulnerable is important, but you've got to bring some, what I'll call kind of resolution to your vulnerability. So to just barf your emotions all over the table and kind of say, I'm a mess, that's not what I'm talking about.
No.
It's saying, this is an area that I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm going to do to take care of it.
As part of the communication with the spouse.
Right.
So you don't just like complain and barf and be vulnerable. You say, okay, yeah, that's all happening, but here's my solution for it.
Here's my plan.
Right. Here's my plan.
And she can be a part of that. She
Right.
can say, here's what I'm seeing. You should be inviting her to share, because she's got a lot of wisdom.
Right.
She knows you better than anyone else on the planet, most likely, if you're in a marriage with this woman. And so she's probably got some really great advice, and you need to have the ability to hear that.
Oh yeah.
And go, yeah, you know what? I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll listen. I'm listening. I'm hearing that. And then you take that advice. And so, I mean, some of the best advice you're ever going to get is going to be from her.
Yeah,
so she needs to be a part of that, but also you're not looking to her to solve your problems.
Right. Right. Well, like that conversation I had with Tiffy this morning. Literally, I did it my cold plunge this morning before I came in here, and you know, that insight was powerful for me.
That's
She's
right.
like, it's okay to be vulnerable.
That's
you know?
right. It's huge. Yeah.
And you know, some of the greatest advice I ever gotten was from her, frankly. So you know, to go back and think about some of the things that I did wrong with Tiffany, you know, because I was so dependent on the relationship and focused on being with her, and she was like my world. When she did do these trips with the girls, I would operate from fear, and I would get defensive and angry, and even give ultimatums, and that, I mean, she got to a point where she was afraid to even tell me if she was going to go do it. She was going to do it regardless, but she was afraid to tell me about it. And you know, I remember ultimately working through it with her, but there were years where she would go on these trips or go do things with girls, and I would just feel like, yeah, you know, why aren't you spending time with me? It was a real kind of a weak place to be, and I know it really turned her off, because she's like uber feminist, and I'm not feminist, I'm feminine, uber feminine. I mean, she's one of the most feminine women I've ever met, and you know, she is actually turned off by men that are feminine, and I was operating in that place, and I know that was a big part of what happened. But you know, so I've got another question. You know, we did therapy, we did couples counseling, things like that, which really didn't work. What's the difference between what you do and stuff like that, the counseling? What's the difference?
Yeah. Well, first off, I don't really care how you feel.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I say that in jest a little bit,
Okay.
but what I mean is I'm going to give you the best practices,
Okay.
the actions that I think align with how you want to show up.
Mm.
And I want you to put those into play,
Okay.
and let go of the outcome. And I believe that if you take the right actions that we know work
Right.
in relationship or are good for a man, you're going to, over time, feel better.
And so will she.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? So if therapy, to use a sports metaphor, is like going to the locker room, getting a massage and an ice bath, which is really important.
Right.
What I do is maybe a little bit more like, we're out on the field. Here's the plays that we're going to be running.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, because that ties right into the training you've been giving me. By the way, guys, if you want to check out, again, he's got a lot of free videos, but if you text Bart to 72345, there'll be one there, and then you can look him up, and there's other stuff there as well. Really helpful. If you feel like you need help with this, or ladies, if you feel like your guy needs help with this, text Bart to 72345. And again, I get nothing for doing this. This is just, I want to help you if you're in the same place that I was, because it's not a cool place. And you know, and a lot of pain associated with losing Tiffy over my behavior. So, you know, it's humbling, very humbling.
Let me add something to that too. I think it's really important that guys know that, you know, they don't need their wife's buy-in or the girlfriend's buy-in if they're going to work with me.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, some clients,
the women have no idea.
No idea that
Right.
I'm even there, which it doesn't really matter. I mean, what matters is that the changes are being made.
Yeah. And it's not about telling her about the changes either. It's
No.
about showing her the freaking changes.
100%.
I know you told me that, because I wanted to tell Tiffy, hey, I'm doing this, this, and this. And you're like, no, just show up differently. That's what she wants. Because she's not going to believe it anyway.
That's right.
You know, if she's been in with a relationship with you for a long time, you have to show up differently. So, No, I'm going to continue this process with you because I'm a slow learner, and I know we did an 8-week program, but I'm going to continue because I need more help. But it's been a real eye opener and shocking to me because again, I mean, I'm muscular. I work out every day. I feel like a masculine SOB, and to hear that I was operating at feminine just makes me freaking nuts. But
well, and working with a lot of executives, I'll say this, the behaviors that work for you at work
right.
so often work against you at home.
Right.
And so it's developing that awareness,
Yeah.
and now you're in this new chapter where you're building this new man who's like an emotional gangster, an emotional ninja, right? And Ed Milet put out a social media video recently that I thought was so cool.
Yeah, Ed's awesome.
Ed's awesome. And he tells this story of he was, driving in his car. Some guy pulled up to him and started kind of egging him on to race. And Ed was like, I'm not going to race this guy. But this guy kept kind of ribbing him and saying, come on, man, why you pussy, or whatever he was saying, right? And really getting Ed to try and take that bait and race him down the street. And Ed has clearly done the work on himself. And he said, guys, listen, years ago, I would have totally flipped and, told this guy what I thought of him, or, maybe taken the bait and raced. And he said, I did not let this guy impact my decision making. I didn't red line at all. I just sat there, listened to him, and didn't let anything that he said impact how I was feeling. And he said, it's a better feeling than any money in the bank, than any, award I've received, any new, followers I got on social media. It was the best feeling. And that is what we're chasing after in the Lion's Den, is to get guys to this place where in the past, maybe they felt criticized or they felt attacked. And now they're in this place where they're just like, I'm good. And they're able to just listen and respond and know that they're good enough and that they have enough, and they can be, loving in spite of some of the feelings that they felt in the past.
And external influences. I mean, Ed could have broken the guy in half. I don't know if you've seen Ed. He's got bigger muscles than he's got more muscles. Yeah, but you shared a Bible verse with me that has really impacted me, because my worst quality is my impatience. And that's the reason I have 4.5 stars instead of 5, and I jump ahead and cut people off and so on and so forth. And I'm listening to respond rather than listening to listen, all these things that I'm working on. And the Bible verse was something like, love is patient, love is kind, love is, please continue.
Yeah. So 1 Corinthians 13, so often read at weddings,
right?
And it's love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, is not proud, is not self-seeking, keeps no record of wrongs.
That's
on,
right?
Such
an awesome freaking quote,
right? But I love that it starts with love is patient.
Love is patient. Yeah. That's something, that's probably one of the biggest things I have to work on in life. Well, listen, brother, I appreciate you coming down here. We've been hanging out for the last couple of days. He's been in my guest house. We've had a blast, and it's been a real treat for me because he's had such a huge impact on my life. And, I highly recommend, if you feel like you could benefit from this, text Bart to 72345 and check him out, check out his video work, and start working on this, because the world needs more masculine men. Okay. So anyway, thanks for coming down, brother.
Thank you, Rod. Yeah. Been amazing.
So one other quick thing. We encounter so many people that are frankly frustrated. They're looking in the mirror and they're frustrated that they haven't been able to escape the rat race. They haven't been able to build cash flow to the point where they're able to have financial and time freedom with their families. And maybe they see other people buying real estate and creating, incredible cash flow, and they think, well, it's just scary. Buying apartments is intimidating. And I get it. See, that's why we created our Warrior Mentorship Program. They're our coaching students, and they've had extraordinary results. My students, I've been teaching about 5 years, and they own upwards of 140,000 units now that we know of, right? And we feel like it's just getting going. Now we're looking to grow this group and really take it to the next level. And honestly believe that the greatest transfer of wealth could be upon us right now with this current economic environment. Everything's going on sale. So we're looking for people who want to follow a proven framework, really like a blueprint or a map, literally step by step. And then they're able to leverage our systems and our incredible network to raise money and equity, to find deals and close those deals and build partnerships, really nationwide. So if you're interested in finding out more about how you can become more in our incredible network and take advantage of the unbelievable opportunities that are upon us, you can apply to my Warrior Mentorship Program by texting the word CRUSH to 72345, or you can go to mentorwithrod.com. And what we'll do is we'll set up a call so you can check us out and we can check you out and see if it's a fit. Now again, you can go to mentorwithrod.com or text the word CRUSH to 72345 to apply, and we will speak soon.